All right, so today we're going to be looking at the case of Alissa Turney.
Oh.
And I think this is a really interesting one because you sent over a bunch of articles from people.com.
Right.
And even like Alyssa's Wikipedia page. And there's a lot here.
There is.
And I think this is one of those stories that's been really popular online recently.
It has been, yeah.
And it's a big one.
It is, yeah. And I think, it's one of those cases that really grabs you.
Oh, yeah.
Because it really focuses on, the power of family.
Right.
And the lengths people will go to for their loved ones.
Exactly. And I think that kind of what makes this such a good one for us to deep dive into is that you have the sister, Sarah,
Right.
who really becomes this driving force in trying to find out what happened to Alissa.
Absolutely.
And she really goes to great lengths.
Oh, yeah.
She starts a podcast. She's doing all this stuff on social media. She even starts a petition to get her stepfather, Michael, arrested.
Wow.
And this is after years of this case kind of going nowhere.
Yeah.
And.
So she was really,
Yeah.
taking the investigation into her own hands.
Totally.
She wasn't going to just let this go.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because she goes through all these police documents.
Yeah, thousands of pages.
And, that's got to be just mind-numbing.
Oh, absolutely.
Do that.
Yeah. But it's really a testament to how dedicated she was to finding out the truth.
Yeah.
That's...
And she uses
absolutely...
Michael's own, home videos and audio recordings against him.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Home videos?
I know, right?
What was on those recordings?
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So basically, she becomes like this digital detective.
Okay.
Think of it like, how you would put together a puzzle?
Right.
But instead of using physical pieces, she's using these digital clues.
I see.
Voice recordings, timestamps, even the background noise in videos.
Wow.
She was looking for anything that could challenge his version of events.
Looking for basically any inconsistency in what he had been saying over the years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any hidden detail.
Got it.
That just didn't add up.
So let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Who is Michael?
So Michael is Alyssa's stepfather.
Okay.
And she was living with him and her younger sister, Sarah, in Phoenix, Arizona.
Gotcha.
She was 17 years old at the time. And by all accounts, was just living a pretty normal life.
Okay.
She was working at Jack in the Box, had a boyfriend, dreamed of moving to California.
I feel like that's every teenager.
Right.
Yeah.
Just typical teenager stuff.
Normal teenage hopes and dreams.
Exactly. And I think it's important to establish that normalcy because
for sure.
It makes her disappearance that much more jarring. So it was May 17th, 2001.
Okay.
The last day of her junior year of high school.
Wow.
When she vanished.
Okay.
A note was found suggesting that she had run away to California.
Oh, interesting.
But here's where things get a little complicated.
All right, I'm listening.
Okay, so Alissa left behind all of her belongings.
What do you mean?
Money.
Okay.
Her car.
Oh, wow.
Her cell phone.
So it doesn't really sound like she ran away.
Right.
Yeah.
If you were running away, wouldn't you at least take some cash and
Yeah, your phone. At least your phone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to California.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes the note a big question mark.
Exactly. Was it genuine?
Right.
Was it a message from Alissa?
Yeah.
Or was it planted to mislead everyone? And the thing is, the police at the time didn't seem too concerned about that question.
Wait, they didn't jump on this right away.
No, not really.
The initial response was pretty lackluster.
Oh, wow.
To say the least.
So Michael just called it in and said, hey, she ran away.
Pretty much.
And they're like, okay.
Yeah, he insisted that she ran away, and the police kind of just left it at that.
So they just took his word for it.
Basically.
That's a pretty big gamble.
It is, if you ask me.
It is, and it happens more often than you might think.
Really?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Wow.
There can be biases, procedural issues that lead to this lack of urgency.
I see.
Especially when it comes to missing teenagers.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes those initial assumptions about runaway cases can really lead to crucial evidence being missed.
Or ignored. That's a really tough pill to swallow.
It is.
So what happened next? Did the case just go cold?
For a while, yeah.
Okay.
It did. But then 5 years later, there's this bizarre twist.
Okay.
A jailed serial killer confesses to Alyssa's murder.
Hold on.
A false confession? How did that even happen?
It's complicated.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a desire for notoriety.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a way to manipulate the system.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the reason, it ends up shining a new light on the case.
Right.
I mean, these false confessions, they're tragic, often baseless.
Yeah.
But they do force investigators to go back, re-examine the evidence with a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
And sometimes that leads to uncovering things they missed the first time around.
So did this false confession lead to anything substantial in Alissa's case?
It definitely brought renewed attention to the investigation, which is what Sarah had been fighting for all along.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, in 2008, things took a really shocking turn.
All right. What happened?
The police raided Michael's home and uncovered this massive stash of weapons, explosives.
Are you serious?
And detailed plans to attack a local union building.
That's insane.
Right.
Talk about a plot twist.
It's crazy. So suddenly, the grieving stepfather becomes a person of interest with this whole hidden life. Okay. And remember those home videos Sarah was looking through? Well, they became even more important.
Okay.
They started to paint a picture of Michael's controlling behavior and the inconsistencies in his story.
And she was able to use those to kind of back up.
Exactly. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
It was a game changer.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
Suddenly, these seemingly innocent home videos became potential evidence.
Wow.
The timestamps, the background sounds, they could all be cross-referenced with witness statements and Michael's own alibi.
So it's kind of like every little detail becomes important.
Exactly. And that's what digital forensics is all about.
Oh, okay.
They're finding those hidden gems in a sea of data.
Gotcha.
It's not just about recovering deleted files or cracking passwords. It's about using technology to reveal the truth that might be hiding in plain sight.
So did those home videos actually lead to any breakthroughs?
Well, they definitely helped build a stronger case against Michael.
Okay.
The analysis revealed inconsistencies in his timeline and highlighted his controlling behavior towards Alissa.
It's like a puzzle piece that just fits in perfectly.
It all started to point towards a very disturbing picture.
It feels like this is where things should have really started moving forward.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But it still took years of Sarah's tireless campaigning, gathering evidence, and just keeping Alissa's story in the public eye.
So how long was it before charges were actually filed?
It wasn't until 2020.
Wow, that's heartbreaking.
It is. Just imagine the frustration and anguish Sarah must have felt.
Just years of hitting roadblocks.
Yeah, and never giving up.
Yeah.
But she never did give up.
Wow, that's incredible.
And finally, in 2020, Michael was arrested and charged with Alissa's murder.
So after all those years, they finally had their day in court.
They did.
Okay.
The trial took place in 2023. And it was a tense battle.
Oh, I bet.
Between the prosecution, who presented all the circumstantial evidence Sarah had worked so hard to gather.
Okay.
And the defense, who argued that there wasn't enough concrete proof to actually link Michael to Alissa's disappearance.
So it sounds like this trial really hinged on the power of circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, pretty much.
What exactly did they present? Like, what was their case?
Well, the prosecution laid out a pretty compelling narrative.
Okay.
They had the inconsistencies in Michael's statements, the suspicious nature of the note, the stockpile of weapons found in his home, the analysis of the home videos that pointed toward a pattern of control and potential violence.
Yeah.
They argued that all of this, taken together, painted a very damning picture.
It does sound pretty convincing. Yeah. What was the defense's counter-argument?
Their main point was that none of the evidence directly proved that Michael had harmed Alissa.
Okay.
There was no murder weapon.
Right.
No witnesses to a crime.
I see.
And most crucially, no body.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right.
Yeah.
They argued that while the circumstances were suspicious, suspicion alone wasn't enough to convict someone of murder.
So basically, it came down to that age-old legal debate.
Exactly.
So circumstantial evidence versus direct evidence.
Yeah, and in this case, the jury sided with the defense.
Oh, wow.
Despite the mountain of circumstantial evidence, they found Michael not guilty.
So after all that work,
I know.
All those years of fighting for justice,
it's hard to believe.
He just walked free.
He did.
Wow.
And it just goes to show how difficult it can be to secure a conviction in these cases.
Right.
where there's no direct, irrefutable proof.
Especially when you have a case that's been going on for so long.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The justice system demands a very high standard of evidence.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even when everything seems to point towards guilt, it's just not enough.
Yeah, and it raises some interesting questions about the role of digital activism in the legal system.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, without Sarah's efforts, would this case have even gone to trial?
That's a great point.
It's amazing to think about how much she was able to accomplish just by using social media and her podcast.
Absolutely.
But there's also like a potential downside to that, right?
There is.
What about spreading misinformation?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Or like influencing public opinion before a trial even begins.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance when it comes to using social media in these cases.
For sure.
On the one hand, it can be a powerful tool for amplifying voices and demanding justice.
Right.
But on the other hand, it can potentially create biases, spread rumors, and even interfere with the judicial process.
So how do we navigate this new landscape?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue.
It feels like uncharted territory.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's about finding that sweet spot between raising awareness, sharing information responsibly, and respecting the boundaries of the legal system.
Right.
We need to encourage open dialogue and critical thinking, and we need to be wary of jumping to conclusions based solely on information we see online.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It is.
But ultimately, in Alissa's case, it seems like even with the massive public attention and Sarah's relentless efforts, some crucial pieces of the puzzle are still missing.
They are.
Where do things stand now?
Well, despite the acquittal, Alissa's case remains unsolved.
Oh, wow.
Her body has never been found.
So they still don't know what happened to her.
And the question of what happened to her on that day in 2001 still lingers.
And for Sarah and her family to live with that not knowing,
that's unimaginable.
That must be incredibly difficult.
It is, and it highlights the importance of resources and support systems for families of missing persons.
Right.
It's not just about finding the missing individual.
Right. It's about
helping those left behind.
Whole family.
Navigate the emotional turmoil and uncertainty.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a long and difficult road.
It is.
And they need all the support they can get.
So after diving deep into all these details, what are your final thoughts?
That's a good question.
What's the one thing you really want our listener to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that even in cases that seem clear-cut, truth can be incredibly elusive.
Right.
We have to be careful about forming judgments based solely on circumstantial evidence.
Even if it seems overwhelmingly convincing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The justice system is designed to protect the innocent.
Right.
And sometimes that means accepting that we may never have all the answers.
It's a humbling reminder that even with all the advances in technology and investigation techniques, there are still mysteries that may never be fully solved.
That's the truth.
Wow.
And I think that's where empathy and compassion become so important.
Yeah.
We need to remember that behind every missing person's case, there are real people grappling with unimaginable loss and uncertainty.
And that's why stories like Alissa's are so important to share.
Absolutely.
Because it reminds us to stay vigilant, keep asking questions, and to never give up hope for answers.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating and thought-provoking deep dive.
For sure.
I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listener has too.
Me too.
If you're as captivated by Alissa's story as we are, we highly encourage you to check out Sarah Turney's podcast, Voices for Justice.
It's incredible.
It's an amazing resource for learning more about the case and for understanding the wider issue of missing persons.
It's a must-listen for anyone interested in true crime, social justice, or the power of human resilience.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and remember, every voice matters in the pursuit of truth. It really makes you think about all those families out there who are dealing with these unsolved cases.
Absolutely.
The not knowing.
Robbie.
The constant wondering.
Stuff's tough.
That must be so hard to live with.
It is, and it really underscores the need for more resources and support systems.
Oh, yeah, for
families of missing persons.
It's not just about finding the missing person.
Right. It's about the whole family.
It's about helping those left behind cope with that trauma and that uncertainty.
Absolutely. It's a long road.
So after all these twists and turns, what are your final thoughts? What's the one thing you really want our listener to take away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that even in cases that seem clear-cut, where you think, oh, this is open and shut, truth can be so slippery.
And we have to be really careful about forming judgments based on just circumstantial evidence, even when it seems really convincing.
Especially in a case like this, where everything seems to point in one direction.
Right.
But the justice system is designed to protect the innocent.
It is.
And sometimes that means we have to accept that we may never have all the answers.
It's hard, but it's true.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this case so fascinating.
It really is.
And so frustrating at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a humbling reminder.
It is.
That even with all the technology, all the advancements we have, some mysteries just might never be solved.
And that's where I think empathy and compassion are so important.
Because we have to remember that behind every missing person case, there are real people who are dealing with incredible pain and uncertainty.
And that's why these stories are so important to keep telling.
They remind us to stay vigilant.
To keep asking questions.
To never stop searching for answers.
Never give up hope.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
It has been.
I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listener has too.
I think so.
If you're as captivated by Alissa's story as we are, be sure to check out Alissa Turney's podcast, Voices for Justice.
It's a great resource.
She goes into amazing detail about the case.
She does.
And really helps you understand this whole issue of missing persons.
She's an amazing advocate for families like hers.
And it's inspiring to see how she turned her personal tragedy into this platform for change.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and remember, every voice matters in the pursuit of truth.